Hey y'all, it's me, your host, Coach Pilar Arthur Sneed. Thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of The Last 10th. So this week, I'm going to say something a little bit different than I normally say, but not too much. This week, I am super excited, but for a lot of reasons. I'm super excited because I have founders and members of the Wayv Run Kollektiv, joining me from Berlin all the way across the ocean. I'm super excited about that. But I'm also excited because you may be listening to the show, but I'm going to encourage you to watch the show on YouTube because we are in this fabulous beautiful background. It looks like we're in the south of France or perhaps in Berlin talking to one another. It really looks really awesome. So I am just super excited to welcome. I have Justice with me on the show. I have Win with me on the show. I have Jared with me on the show. And I have Daniel with me on the show today. Y'all, welcome and thank you so much for joining me. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Your
Thank you.
mics.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Yay, yay, yay. Thank you so much. So I have been following the Wayv Run Kollektiv for probably about, I'm not really sure when you got started, but it seems like it was about sometime in the middle of the pandemic that I found your Instagram account, and I was just really motivated and inspired by the mission of the organization. And I really love everything that you are doing. So it would be really great for my listeners if someone would just tell my listeners a little bit about the organization and what your mission, goals, and aims are.
Take it away, Captain Huyen.
Yeah, thank you so much, Coach Pilar. Thank you so much for the introduction as well. This is Huyen speaking. Daniel and I actually met in New York back in the day. We were part of the running community there and in New York City. And then Daniel decided to move to Berlin a year ahead of me. This was 2017. And when I decided to come back to Germany, I'm a Vietnamese German, so I was born and raised here, but lived in the States for 5 years. And when I decided to come back here, I was like, Daniel, we need to do something. The running community here in Germany is very white and heteronormative. And just being so inspired and so embraced in the New York City community, I was I really wanted to create our own little running collective. So Daniel and I got together, and we're here to embrace and empower and uplift Black and Brown, queer, marginalized, Muslim people to start running, to train with us, and to get active in and beyond running.
Excellent, excellent. So what I'm hearing, I may have mispronounced your name. It's Huyen or Huen?
Huyen.
Please correct me.
It's Huyen.
Huyen.
Yes.
Okay, got it. I don't want to keep continuing to mispronounce names, so I appreciate the correction. So how did you and Daniel, how did you meet?
So we were both pretty deep into the running community in New York, and as you may be very aware, it is heavily saturated from upstate to downstate with all of the run clubs ever. But Huyen was part of, at the time, one of the most cool and aesthetically pleasing run clubs in New York. But she, in her own light, is a disciplined artist and designer, and I, at the time, worked for Nike Run Club and was a pacer, and so we were both around. We were both around and deep into what at the time really felt like a golden era of running, where it was cool and sexy all of a sudden, and there was a lot of energy around it, and it was very exciting coming from like a competitive high school running background where I would be called expletives as I was running on the street, to now have
Yes.
like these events and these races that were exciting and interesting. Um, so being able to bring that over to Berlin and keep that same sort of New York energy where we wanted to make something really special. I think Huyen and I used both our superpowers to try to make what we have today. And fortunately now we have a really incredible group of people, Justice and Jared included, who have really made this into something very, very special.
Excellent. Excellent. Would you say that you have made it as glamorous as some of the run clubs in New York City?
I mean, you get a bunch of black, brown,
I
queer,
I feel
beautiful
like,
people.
yeah.
There's no way it's not going to be glamorous.
That's
There's no
right. That's,
way.
that's it. That's all I'm saying. That is all I'm saying. So I'd really love to hear from Justice and Jared. Tell me about how you got involved in the Wayv Run Kollektiv.
I can go first.
Excellent.
Jared, is that okay? I met Huyen actually at an event. No, actually, we got introduced to someone that I knew when I was looking for someone who could help me with my website, because at that time I was also preparing um, well, I was just in the middle of the founding process for my travel agency, and was
Mm,
looking for someone who could help me out with writing articles and stuff. And then I don't know, through a group post that a friend of mine did, Huyen got introduced to me, and we actually, the first time we met was at the event, and then we talked and had a lot of fun. And then she said, by the way, I'm also leading a running group, why are you not joining us? And I was like, yeah, why not? It's been quite a few years that haven't run, and I would love to do it again and see um, yeah, how I feel about it, also because she told me that she's leading it together with Daniel, and that it's um, not a white space, to say,
mm,
which I really appreciated and still do. So I just came and went to a training and loved it and stayed. Yeah.
excellent. Excellent. And Jared.
Thank you so much for having us, Coach
Oh,
Pilar. It's nice
it's
to
my
meet
pleasure.
you. So I actually also met Huyen at a conference, at an event a few years back, and I was just so in awe of like all that she had achieved. I mean, Huyen
Mm,
is quite young, and she's
mm,
already run maybe like 6 marathons,
mm,
and Huyen and Daniel are very, very humble. But then I
mm,
met Huyen, and she was like, "Yeah, why don't you just stop by next weekend? Stop by one of our practices." And I went, and I don't think I've ever been in a space where I've seen so many black and brown people, like just like running
mm,
on a track,
mm,
like distance running. And then
mm.
we went out to grab brunch after a practice, and I just felt that that this is a group that I would love to be part of, that
Mm,
I'd love to support.
mm,
And I also attended Wave's first birthday celebration, which was,
yeah.
I don't know if that was last year or the year before. It feels that I don't, how long, when was Wave's first birthday party? Was it last year, Daniel? I'm not quite sure.
2
2
years
years
ago.
ago. Oh, so
Mm.
it's been already been 2.5 years. Wow, time
Wow.
has flown. Really, time has
Wow.
flown.
Wow.
So this was, I think, back in 20, I want to say back in 2018. So 2018, 2019. I'm not quite sure when. But I met Huyen, and that just led to me going to one of the practices and then
Mm,
going out to brunch with the team. And then I also have, like, been part of a few ventures with Nike with the team. And
mm,
I've just, I was a sprinter in college, so me sort of making my
mm.
journey to becoming a distance runner, I think, is I owe that in large part to Huyen and Daniel.
Wow. Wow.
We brought him. We
So
brought him to the good side.
that's right. That's right. Excellent. I love that. I really love hearing about how groups of people come together, and I I there's a couple of different directions that I'm thinking about right now, but I think the first thing that I would like to focus on is creating safe spaces for people of color, for queer runners, particularly for trans runners. How have you been successful in creating this space? Because for me, looking at what you're doing overseas, even though we have a lot of run crews in America, the predominant run crew for queer runners is front runners, and front runners is predominantly white and predominantly male. So I don't personally feel comfortable entering into that space. So let's talk about creating space for Black and brown runners. Yeah, let's talk about that. How have you done it so successfully?
Yeah,
You
I can
went.
start. Well, just being immersed in New York, I also saw and experienced a lot of amazing run crews, but most of them, led by men, and and most of them also not necessarily queer and or feminist. So even though some of them display um, diversity, they not necessarily care as much about like changing structures and
Mhm,
changing the narratives.
mhm,
So when I left the New York City running community and came to Berlin, I was like, you know what, Huyen, why not start your own club? Why not start
mhm,
your own running group, and which is like feminist led.
mhm,
And maybe Daniel can share more about front runners, because you were in New York, and they take up so much space in New York as well.
mhm, mhm,
I mean, it's sort of also just a picture of the larger scope of like how activism looks, where a lot of the spaces are primarily white, cisgendered, and passing,
mm,
which is all fine and well, but not everyone has that privilege.
mhm,
And even when I ran in high school, I came out my second year of high school right before I was captain of the team, and being out was something that I learned to be a source of strength. But
mm,
I think that comes from just like a survival mentality.
mm,
So being in New York, and yeah, I saw front runners, and it's no shade to them, but I think from the foundation, if the foundation isn't sort of set on being transgressive and really making space for people, the people who are going to show up first are the people who have access to that stuff. Um,
mhm,
so even here in Berlin, Huyen and I, although we are from marginalized communities, like we benefit from the fact that like we have quote unquote runners' bodies, and we've
mm,
run the races. We have the equipment, you know? So we
mhm,
could show up to any of these groups and perform.
mm,
But something that has been so lovely to see in our team is that we don't have to show up and perform. We can just
mm,
exist. We can acknowledge the fact that, like, throughout the day, we've maybe had some microaggressions, or someone has called us something, or looked at us a funny way, and not have to explain that to anyone. We can just talk about it, sit with it
mhm,
for a second, and then leave it
mhm,
in lane one, and then go about
mhm,
our business, you know?
mhm. That's so, so very important. I've talked about that um, aspect, I think, of groups a lot, in that it's important to be able to have a space where you can just walk in, show up, and kind of know that the people that are in your space get it. They get what you've gone through, what you're going through, what you're going to go through in the future. But what I really want to know is I really want to know about some of the, maybe, I guess, brass tacks things that have been done to sort of make a space, whether it be physically making a space for people um, to show up and feel that way. So maybe, Justice, as being a part of the run crew, maybe you can talk about what it feels like to be a part of the crew and how that has impacted you. Oh, Mike.
It's off again.
There
Okay,
you go.
now. I mean, you already have mentioned the word like safer space, right? So I feel like, especially in sports, or it can also be, and yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily running. But a lot of these places are very dominated by white people, and you are always kind of, you're not relaxed when you go into these kind of spaces, right? You as much as you love the sports, you still feel like it's a place where you could experience microaggressions there, or you know that maybe people look at you in a different way in terms of, okay, you have to perform overly good to be accepted as a part of the team. And that's just very different at Wayv. I think like everyone is welcome, and everyone is, as Daniel already said, wherever you are that day, that's absolutely fine. And sometimes also there are like track trainings, and there are some um, like some people go more on a lower pace, some people go more on a faster pace, and it's very accepted, and we like nobody's pushed to perform on an overly high level. And I think that also already takes a lot of pressure, but then also the fact that we can talk about emotions and be honest and be like, hey, today I didn't feel like I was appreciated at work or whatever. And then also the last year we had this little tradition of sharing a highlight of the week in the end of the session while stretching. And I think this kind of small things that are actually big really create a unique atmosphere among the team as well, a very different feeling of team or community as well, because you know you can actually do like what you enjoy doing. This is like running, and then also you know that there are people who kind of know your struggles, and if they don't know your struggles, then they respect them, they respect your boundaries, they ask you to actually also appreciate and love your body despite the fact that maybe you're not on your best that day. And I think that's it's a lot that you take that you get from this. So then it's also, I always feel super energetic when I get out of the training, although I was just running for an hour or 1.5. Yeah, so that's really nice.
Were you always a runner?
No, I mean, I was always in school, I was always good at it. And afterwards I did run for myself. I did like a 10K run also all by myself, just because I just wanted to do it. Years after I graduated and moved to Berlin, and yeah, but I didn't like, there was no one who kind of told me that there are running groups.
That's right.
And there are also BIPOC running groups, you know, and I mean, there are not many. So yeah, I'm really glad I met Huyen and she invited me to that space. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. And Jared, you mentioned that you were a sprinter. So now you're making this transition into long distance running. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. So I attended a small liberal arts college in Maine, in a predominantly white town known as Brunswick, Maine, close to Portland. I think there are
I know how that is.
Yes, around 1,800 students at my college.
Yes.
And I was on the track team all 4 years. I was a captain my senior year, but I ended up having two season-ending injuries. One my junior year, I tore my PCL, and then I broke my leg during a race during my senior year,
Wow.
and that sort of ended everything. So I obviously had a number of reservations going into joining another running group, because I thought, oh my gosh, I hope that I'm not going to get injured again.
Of course.
How can I sort of like create a more holistic relationship to running? Because
Yes.
I felt that I was running to just perform, and then when I met Huyen
Yes.
and Daniel and Wayv, it was sort of thinking about, and Huyen touched upon this a little bit earlier, thinking about life beyond the track, right? So who are we
Yes.
when we leave the track? And I think that's what Wayv has taught me and has actually given me, is this community that is really interested in knowing who you are, how you're doing. I mean, we
Yes.
decided to dedicate this last season to mental health, and
Yes.
focusing on because we know that this pandemic has affected everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and mental health is definitely one of the biggest issues. And we
Yes.
decided to focus on the psychological health of our teammates.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me, part of that also was, I was learning about my body, trying to have a better relationship to my body. I've struggled with
Mm.
body image issues and stuff in the past. And I think this team effort that we had this past season for the half marathon really, really helped me to sort of like come into my own with distance running. And as I said, I owe that in large part to Huyen and Daniel, because, when I was a sprinter, I was like, yeah, I got to run this 400. I got to run this 800. I got to be so fast. And
Yes.
then on the third lap, I'm, out of breath. I'm like, Jared, you need to slow down. This is not a
Yes.
200-meter race.
That's
Slow it
right.
down. You
That's
are
right.
not in college anymore. And now I love going out for a 7 kilometer, 8 kilometer, 10 kilometer run, and that's like pretty easy for me. But I think 5 years ago that would have been really difficult for me, but now that's sort of the standard. I go out an easy run, 30-minute or maybe 40-minute run, and I know that I can do that. And I'm just very grateful to have a community that, as I said, is really interested in supporting me on this journey, and then which I can also support moving forward.
Excellent. I love that. I love to hear that. So, Huyen, I am wondering about your own run journey. How did you get started in running? What brought you to the sneakers?
Great question, Coach Fila. Um, I never did track and field in school, so I
Mm,
was never really exposed to it. I saw, just like some other students, having all these hobbies and being in clubs, but and this is like something we can also touch upon, class and access, really, because
yes.
um, instead of being outside and playing sports, I had to like help my parents in the restaurant at
Mm,
12 years of age.
mm,
And it wasn't until I left high school and then did a gap year in the US. And I lived with a Jewish family in New Jersey.
mm.
And the mom, who was a doctor, who at her job would deliver so many babies, and at home would take care of like her 3 sons. Every single day she would like still go out and go running for like an hour, and I was like, aren't you exhausted? Like, how are you doing this? And she was like, this is the only time I have for myself,
Yes.
she was like, well, if I can do it, you can do it too. And I was like,
Mm,
no way, I can't like go outside and run for an hour straight. And eventually she, yeah, got me. And then I think after 3 weeks of nagging, I was like, okay, let's try 20 minutes.
yes.
And this is how I started. And then eventually I participated in the New York City Half and New York City Full Lottery, won the lotteries, and then started training more competitively. And then I was like, wow, like this is like, I don't know, just experiencing your first full marathon.
Mhm.
And yeah, just crossing that finish line, I felt
Yes.
super human.
Yes.
And I was like, wow, this body can do so much more than we think it can.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, just like through, the ups and downs of running, I like and love and try to also share with my team and with the friends who are starting to run that let's think about it more as like a long-term tool, but also a meditation for us, like something we
Yes.
want to embrace when we are like 70 or 80 years old. And
Yes.
it's amazing to run and race and train for them. But especially this pandemic year has taught us that running and the world of running can be so much bigger, and it is so much bigger than each individual's pursuits.
Absolutely. It can be so much more than all of the competition that we
Yeah,
might have been led to believe when we initially get started in it.
yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I'm quite there yet. I still have a little bit of that competitive streak, but and I'm not fast at all. I'm just competing with myself.
That's the best competing.
Indeed, indeed. And Daniel, how did you get started in running? Tell me more about that.
I mean, I'm not going to let you get away with saying that you're not fast, because fast is subjective.
I
And I
know.
saw
You are
I saw
absolutely
you
right.
crushed Berlin, so we're all fast here on the spectrum.
That's
Um,
that's exactly
but
right.
I moved to the south suburbs of Illinois,
Mm,
and in the Midwest, running cross country running is huge. It's super
mm,
duper huge, and I started through a frenemy type of a thing. There was this girl in my pre-algebra class who was just known for running, and prior to that move, I had never done any type of athletics. I had never considered my body to have that kind of power. My like family nickname is flaco, which means
uh-huh.
skinny, which
Yes.
isn't very powerful, but it's just what I had. And then once I started running, and at first I was terrible. um Not in terms of speed, because speed is subjective, but just like
That's
I
right.
was
That's right.
really just bad at this thing. But I saw at least that the bodies that were successful in that sport
Yes.
um, looked like mine, and
Yes.
I started to get some sort of power from that, and I really, really just grabbed onto the idea that like I could find some success in this thing, and through some training and through some wonderful coaching and through a hell of a lot of stubbornness,
Yes.
I managed to sort of reach a level and fill this sort of weird competition machine that we thought we had to do. And
Mm-hmm.
although I did really and I love racing, and I do think as marginalized people we can get so much power from racing,
Absolutely.
um, it isn't everything, but it is still so wonderful to just like compete and perform, and sort of push those boundaries. And as like a small lanky brown gay boy in the south suburbs of Illinois with nothing but tall white lanky guys around me, it
Yes.
became really, really powerful. And being able to sort of transfer that power from the track to my studies, to
Mm,
my life, to
mm,
my sexuality, that really saved my life in a lot of ways, multiple times
mm.
over. Where now I think the job that both you and I are trying to do is to sort of trick people into coming for a run, and then like they leave with feeling empowered about their body, and we're like, haha, we got you, come and see you next week because now you're hooked forever.
That's so great. My last guest, Erica Williams, she said that she called herself a running evangelist, essentially, and just like this whole idea of getting other Black and brown people out and moving their body so that you can feel in this world, this great big world that so many times tries to disenfranchise your very existence, right?
Hmm.
Just because you are who you are. When you move your body and you get and Huyen, you mentioned this before, like that you cross that finish line and that feeling when you cross the finish line, like, wow. I, for me, when I felt that, I just, in all of my life, I never knew I could do that thing. And every time I cross a marathon finish line, I cry like a baby because it's like this rebirth for me every single time. Every single time. Everybody else is like, "Yay!" and I'm like, "Oh my god, this is amazing." Oh my goodness. So this question is really just for everybody, and anybody can jump in and answer it. But I would really love to know what inspires you. What inspires you?
Jared, Justice, one of you go first, and then we can hop in.
Is this going to be a person, or is it
It
just
can
sort of
be
something?
literally anything.
Um, Serena Williams. I love Serena Williams. Yeah, she, for me, I mean, I've been watching her and her sister ever since I was a teenager, and ever since I saw her, dominate Wimbledon, and I know that when she, came onto the circuit, she and her sister came into the circuit, that was no easy space for them. That was a
Mhm.
very, tennis is a very white space, and I've just been so in awe of just the way that she comports herself, but the way that she's just unapologetically Black, and she embraces her power, her beauty, and the fact that she's just badass. Like, she
Yes,
literally owns tennis. Like, you can't.
yes,
That's like undisputable. You know that when you think of tennis, you think of Serena Williams, and what I think also inspires me is the fact that she, like Serena Williams, like her legend goes beyond tennis, right? She's a cultural
yes,
icon.
yes,
And I know that when she, hangs up her tennis racket, we're still going to be talking about the cultural impact of Serena
mm,
Williams. And I just love Black women,
yes,
love Black femmes, and
yes,
I was raised by Black women, so
yes,
I'm largely inspired by um, just the impact that they have played, um, you know, they've made on my life, but also like in this
yes,
world. So that's my biggest inspiration.
yes, yes. Love that. Love that. Thank you for sharing. Love it.
Ooh, tough question. I think for me, like, I don't know, yeah, it's also similar, like Jared explained. I think, but mainly it's people. I don't know, for me, everyone could inspire me actually,
Mm,
because um, I think um, people who, despite their struggles, just like still keep going and keep pushing and keep like being themselves, and people who take in space, people
mm,
who are um, who just don't bow down or like try to be what maybe society wants them to be, or and this can be celebrities, but I also have a lot of people in my everyday life
mm,
who inspire me as well, and I
mm,
like to surround myself with this kind of people, which is also what, for example, I always realize when we have these track runs, and then in the end everyone shares what they've actually been working on the past week or what they've
yes.
achieved the past week. Then this for me is also super powerful, because you see the person, you maybe talk to the person and laugh with the person, but you don't know what the person is going through or what the person is actually fighting for. And seeing that people actually keep going, although there are so many reasons to say I don't think I can. um, that's what kind of inspires me actually. So it's like, yeah, a lot of a lot of things, to be honest, a lot of people, a lot of moments that
I
inspire
love
me
that.
and that keep me going. So
I love that. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing. I love it. Okay.
I'll go, Huyen, and then you go. Okay. Um, on a on a on a larger scale, I think, because outside of running and primarily I am an artist. Um, so I think what really, really inspires me on the daily is just like human emotions. Human emotions and sexuality are something I think about every single day from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed. Running plays a small hand in that, where one, it just keeps me sane. It provides me with those little bit of endorphins to push through the madness, but it also they also mix really, really wonderfully. Like so much of running is just emotion, and so much of running is like pushing those limits. But for me, the stuff, the people, the art, the music that inspires me is the one that like is just really in touch with emotion. Like Nina Simone is the artist
Yes.
of my life, you know.
Yes.
James Baldwin, like reading things and listening to things that sort of tap into these emotions that you're like, oh, but I thought only I had that thing. I thought only I experienced that thing, and then you see that like no, someone has managed to turn these things into such larger things than just their own experience, which is I think what we're trying to do too with running, where it's like it can be a very personal experience, and running is outside of like competitive running and even in cross country, where on a larger scale it is a team effort, but it's still just you and your body and your efforts. But it's so wonderful to be able to share those things, and that feeling that you had when you crossed the line. I think it's just human nature to say, oh, that felt really good. How many other people can I get to feel that? You know? Um,
Yes.
and specifically, like I think it takes a little bit of energy to say, how many other Black, brown, queer, trans, non-binary, marginalized people can I get to do that? Because we really are never reached out to say, hey, go do this thing. We're like, no, here we are. We're doing it. We can do it.
Yes. So I just want to throw up my fist and be like, yes. I feel that. I feel that. Every day I feel that. Yes. UN.
Yeah. Yes. So apart from people, let's say, um, out of our like everyday reach, like Serena Williams. Daniel mentioned James Baldwin, and earlier today I was reading Toni Morrison, and but the first word that came to mind after you asked the question was like community, and it's being surrounded by the incredible people we are surrounded by today and right now at this moment. Jared is such an amazing scholar and educator. Daniel is a designer and artist, and Justice is, she started her own company and is currently working at 2 startups, I think.
Wow.
And that is like just so inspiring to me, and being surrounded by this kind of energy, and being surrounded by this energy and people who are challenging the status quo and creating their own tables and institutions. That really inspires me on the everyday.
Yes. I am like I've been kind of beating this drum about building our own tables throughout the entirety of the pandemic, ever since, Ahmaud Arbery happened, Breonna Taylor here in the US, all of those things happened. And then suddenly, the world was like, oh, wow, we should really, start talking about diversity and inclusion. And I also come from an arts background, and I've always had to create my own table. And I feel like I'd rather create my own table and then have people say, "Oh, we'd like to come where you're eating because that looks like a really delicious meal. There's so many flavors and vibrancy and all of this." I'd rather that than the other way around, being invited to the table where, it's kind of like, "Oh, we're just going to fit everything to what you're, to what we're doing. You fit into what we're doing." So, you've all mentioned a little bit about your careers and your background. I'm wondering, it's kind of a twofold question, if you can talk a little bit about what you do, and then talk a little bit more about some of the ways in which running and the Wayv Run Kollektiv have influenced your work, life, connection, etc. So, Huyen, if you would start, I would love that.
The other day, this word came to mind, the uneducation of myself,
Mhm.
the unlearning.
Yes.
When I lived in New York, I had this very special community. I was surrounded with very progressive, very leftist,
Mm.
and some of my friends over there, Black and brown people, shared their own experiences and also listened to mine, and they
Mm.
were all like, "Yeah, and this is what we experience too," and this is no abstract story. This is you you are speaking the truth, and you
Mm.
need to believe in yourself. And those are actually structural, this is actually structural racism. And this is
Mm.
there's a system behind it for you to not believe your own truths,
Mm.
And they also introduced me to all these amazing, writers and scholars like James Baldwin and Toni Morrison, Angela Davis, Maya Angelou, and so on and
Mm.
so forth. And then I was like, well, I went to school for 20 plus years, and why did I never come across these people, Like what we have been told in history classes and at school or at the university, I felt like it's been all a lie.
Mm.
So when I started, actively engaging myself with, Black history as part of American history,
Mm.
the American war in Vietnam, just
Mm.
reframing what all the lies that we have been told, and just
Mm.
creating my own safer spaces, and
Mm.
surrounding myself with all these books and artworks and people. I then was like, I need to, coming back to Berlin, then I need to create this safer space in running for myself, for my own
Mm.
survival, as well as for each other and for
Yes.
a more multi-perspective community, because that is
Yes.
what we are living today.
Yes.
And what was your question again?
It's okay. I do the same thing. I go, so go and pull the thread, and then I'm like, wait, where was I? I don't even know. But
How running
so,
influences
yeah,
my
how
work.
running. It's really, I mean, you're really answering the question perfectly. It's kind of like how running
It's all
has
intertwined.
influenced your work life, how being in diverse spaces has influenced your running life. It's all interconnected. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And I think when it comes to, running long distance, what it has taught me has been agency over my own body, confidence, as well as endurance. And those are more the high level things. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. When you talk about agency, over your body, the way in which I was raised was that I had no agency over my body. My body was not my own. It did not belong to me. It belonged to my family, and they could say or do whatever they felt was necessary. So for me, running was like this space. And I think that's probably why I cry every single time, because every single time I get out on the road, and Daniel, you said this at some point in time, you said it's like it's just you out on the road. And it is, but it isn't. So it's like every time I move my body, this sense of like me being in my own body and me moving my body, and it's mine. It's always been mine. I didn't know that, but it's always been mine. So I love that. I love that phrasing. Yeah. Anybody else like to share about how running has, you know, I'd love to hear. Jared, Justice, Daniel.
I think so. I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts, and I've lived in Germany for about 6 years now. And I currently work as an educational training specialist for an organization that designs, creates workshops and workshop materials for teachers with regard to sexual and gender diversity. So I work primarily in German, and when I first got my job, I remember this was like, I think like exactly a year ago, I interviewed, and then I think on July 1st or July 2nd, I received the news, a phone call informing me that I got the position. So that I was like really, really grateful, because I was unemployed for about like 4 or 5 months
Yes.
between, finishing a job at the university, because I finished my master's last year in gender studies. And I think if anything, Wayv has given me in running, have both given me this sense of you can do it. Like you can do it. I'm not a native German speaker, so that certainly was really difficult. This transition into sort of like my young professional life has not been easy. It's been very, really, really bumpy, especially with the pandemic. I've worked primarily remotely these last few months, and I've given a number of workshops. But I think it's really motivated me and told me you can do it. You can, if you put your mind to it, you can do it. Create your goal. You have to have, the training process, especially like, okay, how can I approach this goal? I need to put in the time, and that's what I did for my half marathon. I put in the time.
That's right.
And so like, when I'm sitting there and I feel frustrated that, I can't formulate something as well as a native German speaker, I have to remind myself, I'm like, Jared, you're running your own race, right? You cannot compare yourself to someone who, once they got out of the womb, they were either close to the finish line. I'm still on the race. I'm still on my own race, and
Yes.
I have to acknowledge that, and I have to accept that. And I think that's sort of the main takeaway for me
Yes.
with regard to running's impact or influence on my work and professional life.
Yes. Love that. Love that, Jared. Love that. And Justice, startup entrepreneur, talk to me. Talk to me about this.
um,
Go,
so
Justice.
yeah. Well, I mean, I founded a travel agency actually in the middle of the pandemic, right, last year, 2020. And why did I do it? There were a lot of different reasons. I traveled to Africa, I think the first time when I was 19, but this was Egypt. I stayed there for 3 months. Then I went back again when I was 23, and I went to Gambia this time, and now I've traveled to 6 countries, right?
Wow.
And every time, especially in the beginning, I was so shocked because of all the pictures and everything that I knew about like Africa was just actually horrible, right? Not that you really want to go. And then but then I wanted to see it. I wanted to experience it, and I wanted to be able to come home and say I saw it and it really is horrible. But when I went there, it was really the opposite. And yes, maybe, yeah, I saw poverty, and I think it's a different kind of a poverty than what we know in the West, or at least in Europe. But what I also saw was beauty, and it wasn't like a little beauty. It was like stunning, and I don't know, in so many ways, nature, people, all kinds of things. And I was like, why even like black people in my age and who are were raised in Germany, we don't travel for holidays. We don't travel to Africa unless it's our parents who tell us we're going home, basically, right? But back then it wasn't normal to say I want to travel to another country that I'm not born in. I wasn't born in, or my family isn't from, because I just want to get to know the country. It was more common to go to Asia or to South America, and I feel like maybe it is because the picture that have been painted about the continent is just mostly negative. And with this travel agency, I want to make it easier or make it more attractive for especially Black and people of color in Germany or in Europe to actually travel back. So the long-term goal is to do it at a lot of group tours, or offer a lot of group tours that people can actually just book their spot and everything is covered, like the accommodation and the programs and whatever, and so that people feel just happy and can enjoy actually their own heritage, right, or culture, and get to know it more. And the other thing is also that racism is everywhere actually. So I also want to have, like, at least if it's in Europe, then have different accommodations that are locally owned, where I also know that the people have a certain attitude towards Black and brown people, so that people can also feel safe traveling in Europe and just like actually enjoy their holiday or vacation or business trip or whatever it is. So yeah, because like all these travel offices are not catering to us. They don't see us as valuable customers even. So I want to change that, and I want us to be able to travel wherever we want, because we just want to see it and get to know these places without having to Google how racist are people in this country, or I don't know.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, I will say that when I came to Berlin to run the marathon there, I mean, I don't live there, so what I'm seeing is from a tourist perspective, but I felt like it was very different than being in the United States. In the United States, like, I'm walking around, and everywhere that I am that is a white space, I know. I mean, obviously I know I'm Black. I haven't forgotten it, but it's just like everywhere you go, it's like, oh, she's Black. She's Black, like, right? Like, it's just like this thing that is just, it's always there. But in contrast, when I was in Berlin, with the exception of like one experience in a coffee shop, I did not feel like my Blackness was an albatross for other people, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I don't know. You can speak more.
Yeah, it does.
Closely.
But I think then you had a really, really positive and experience, and that's really nice. I know a lot of people who have had a very different experience. So.
Okay, we'll have to have another show to
talk
about that.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Jared.
definitely. Because Berlin, I mean, Berlin is, I mean, I love the city, but I think that as Justice already said, racism is everywhere, and even in Berlin, there are just, yeah, there's so much. Like, you can sometimes feels like a bubble, because Berlin is, it's probably one of the most progressive one of the more progressive cities in Europe when it comes to sexual and gender diversity. But in my work as a educational training specialist, I mean, I work with teachers, so I'm giving workshops on how they can support queer students. There is a lot of disinformation, a lot of ignorance. We have a long way to go. And when it comes to racism and stuff, I mean, some of the things that comes up in some of my workshops, that's when I sometimes have to shake my head and take a deep breath. Like, okay, let me just take a sip of water right now. Let me not go off. Okay, let me not go off.
Breathe.
But I'm gonna hand it over to Daniel.
Okay.
Oh, my microphone. Am I?
No, you're good.
Yeah, okay, nailed it. I already touched a bit on being an artist and that being it, but specifically with running, and specifically this team, this past year was very uncertain for everyone. And I am someone who sort of falls on the more melancholic side of the emotional spectrum, and dealing with depression has affected both like my role as a leader on this team, and has affected just my life in general. And this past season, as Jared mentioned, was designated by Captain Huyen the season of healing. And it was really an act of like reaching out to the people who are on our team, and reaching out for support, and not only celebrating the highs that can come from a race or from a workout, but really using each other and using this community to sort of uplift and just support each other. And it's been important, and it's been a wonderful lesson to learn, where sort of shifting that perspective of running as this only competitive, ego-fueled thing, where I have to be honest, it does feel really powerful to toe up on the line of the Berlin Marathon and be in Corral A, and then look around me and see only white bodies, and see me in like my cute little singlet with my pink triangle and my cute little shoes, knowing that like they're looking at me, and it's this weird sort of peacocky ego thing, but I'm like, I know that what I'm doing here is taking up space for more than just myself.
Yes.
But with that also comes this weird pressure of having to perform, and having to perform exceptionally. So having this team be supportive even when you're not performing exceptionally, you know, to be able to say, guys, I just can't be there right now. I don't have the capacity. I'm sorry, and to not be met with judgment, but to be met with support, and to be met with energies, and to be met with time and patience is really a gift. I'm about as far as anyone in my family has ever been from Colombia, where I was born.
Wow.
And having these people here be able to support me, and be able to push past those feelings of loneliness during a crazy pandemic where we were all locked up, and we could still have a little Zoom call every week just to check in. It really does something to the spirit. It really, at least personally, has helped me a lot. And I think the goal is that we can do that for the other people on our team, and when other people decide to join us.
Absolutely. I love that. I love it. Thank you all so much for sharing those bits and pieces of your life. This is our last question. I want to wrap it up. I know it's Friday. It's the evening for you. You're ready to do whatever the thing is you do on the weekend. So, my last question is really about advice. If there is advice that you have ever been given, or advice that you would like to give, specifically for BIPOC, queer, trans, Muslim, and different people in the space of running, what would it be? Huyen, would you go first, please?
I actually want to pass it
it
on to Justice.
Okay, go, Justice.
Yeah. So thank you, Hian. I really need to leave the now, because I have to go to another call. But my advice, I think, would be to focus. I think that's something that I always try to do while running, and then I've tried to focus on my body and my breath, or my I am trying to focus on being good and nice to myself also while running, and telling myself that I can. And also outside of life, I try to focus as well, outside of life, outside of running, I try to focus as well on something just to get ahead. I think that's been helpful for me, to just focus on one thing, and get to where I want to go, or what I want to achieve by that.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I could explain it correctly.
You did. Thank you so much for sharing, and
thank you so much for having
so
me
much
as well.
for being here. Really appreciate it.
Was such a nice conversation as well, and thank you.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye. See you soon. Okay. You got it. Okay. Huyen, I would love to hear.
I think I would advise people to be patient,
Mm.
to think long term, and to make the most fun out of it, out of running.
Absolutely.
And there's the next race coming, there's the next training cycle coming, and to have confidence, to have, or like, to build up enough energy and confidence to start your own club,
Yeah.
to start your own table, to start your own institution. And I would love for people to feel empowered after this conversation, to just gather up your own community and find out where all your black and brown friends are, and queer friends, and start your own club.
Done.
I mean, I continue to tell this, but I just love this, Daniel. And Jared, maybe you've heard of it as well. But um, there was this one time when some of us traveled to Shanghai, and some of the queer running members in Shanghai, they told us, and we didn't know. This was the first time meeting these people, and they told us, because of your group in Berlin, because of Wayv, we've been following you on social media. Because of you, we started a queer running club in Shanghai. And this was really inspiring to see, because you never know
Yes.
how much impact your own work and how far your work can travel.
Mm. Yes. I love that. Love it. All right. Jared. Daniel. Jared.
I can
Jared.
go. I can go. I think if the advice is to queer BIPOC people to come out and run, for marginalized people to come out and run, I'd say give it like 2-3 runs,
Mm.
because running, as beautiful as it is also awful and terrible. It's going to test not only your body and but your spirit. I I have never felt what I feel at mile 18 of a marathon, but the tools that you get from being able to push past those moments as a brown queer person just existing in this space, it sort of enlarges the range of tools that I have to just deal with the things that you have to deal with. So to anyone who's sort of questioning, like I understand if initially it's difficult to just find those spaces, but running is simple. You need at most a good pair of shoes, and that's it. It doesn't have to be with a group at first, but just this power of finding yourself in your body and knowing how you move through space, and knowing what happens when you do start to get a little lactic acid in the thighs, and when the knees start to feel a bit crunchy, to be able to know what all of that stuff feels like and when it happens and how it happens can really help you when you're trying to apply for a position that you don't think that you have the requirements for, or when you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to make art that speaks to more than just a white audience,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really just give it 3 runs. Get a good
Mm-hmm.
pair of shoes. If you need some advice on a good pair of shoes, hit any of us up on Instagram. We can help you with
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Go for some good 3 solid runs and maybe end at like 40 minutes, and then talk to me
Mm-hmm.
after when you get those
That's right.
endorphins flowing. Yeah.
That's right. I love that. I love that. And Jared.
Um, I, if I were to give a piece of advice to BIPOC, trans, queer runners, novices, I would say that you don't always have to love running. You don't always have to love the process, because when I was training for the half marathon this past spring, I've had some really really low points, and I remember one run was just very very, it was so bad at the beginning, but then I finished pretty strongly, so I knew, I was like, Jared, if you can start off like on a poor note but then finish off on like a better note, then you can use that to fuel you later on in life. And
Mm.
I didn't particularly love running when I started off, like, with distance running, because like, oh gosh, like 5 kilometers. What? Why do I have to run 5 kilometers? What? That's like four too many. You know what I mean? It's like four too many. Sorry. So I would just say, you don't have to love the process, but just think about it just like twerking on a run, right? Like if you're like twerking in the mirror and you're going out on a run, just think about like how it feels to twerk in the mirror and just to get the energy from that and use that to fuel you. So that would be my second piece of advice.
I just,
Love it.
That is a first. That is
Working
a
in the
first, I
mirror.
gotta say.
I just get like this
Yeah.
image of like running and then just stopping on a run and just being like, just gonna do it.
Yes.
Uh.
Yes. They need to see it. They need to see that we exist, that we also are taking up space. We deserve to take up space, and that we're here and we will always be here.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I
We were
absolutely,
always here.
yeah. We've
Yeah.
always been here. We're here.
Yes. Yes.
Always going to be here. That's yes, that has been my mantra. Look, we're not going anywhere and we've always been here. Man, you guys, I just I usually say y'all. I try not to use gendered speech. So y'all have really, really, really just given me life today. You really have. I thank you so, so very much for taking time out of your day to be here with me, to chat with me, to share your experiences. It it gives me hope in my own run group. I created a run group for queer black and brown
Mm.
folks. Been
Yes,
doing it for
yes.
2 years. I'm not I am personally not nearly as cool as your run crew. My runners
But
are
you are.
super.
But you are.
It just gives me hope to keep going. So I thank you so so very much for being here. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much for the
Thank you
space,
for
Coach
having
Pilar.
us. Thank you
My
so much,
pleasure.
Coach Pilar.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Coach Pilar. And I'm super excited to meet your running club. So maybe
Yeah.
we can come visit you and run with you.
Yeah.
Same. Same. I'm
Yes,
sure my
Yes.
runners would love to
Absolutely.
come
Manifesting it.
to
yes.
Berlin. That's
Let's
right. I'm
speak it
wearing
into existence.
my manifesting bracelet. Let's speak it into existence today.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Awesome.